Good afternoon, friends and colleagues. So, I start with Dr. Habib's the overview of the feed resources. He gave the wonderful the overview of the feed resources assessment, why is required, and if you cannot measure it, so you can manage it. So, but how you measure it and what extent? So that's what I talk about, and making use of the mostly observed data. There's remote sensing. So also, it is my great honor to be here to give a overview of the feed resource assessment in grassland, with more emphasis on the developing countries, how best you can make use of the free remote sensing resources. And I would like to thank Dr. Harinder for inviting for this presentation. In fact, you earlier worked on the FAO feed assessment, so I'm trying to avoid as much as from that resources because we already discussed the much. Just to start with the ICARDA, I'm sure the most of you know, it is the International Center for Agriculture Research in Dry Areas. It is working in all those, the developing part of the world, although it is a global mandate. And looking to those, the yellow hash lines and the green hash lines. So those are the CGA research programs that are concentrated there. And looking into those, the number of the CGI research programs spread across the developing part of the world. And this is where we explored the remote sensing capacity with respect to the climate vulnerabilities and the sustainable intensifications. So looking to two important components, I'm not going to cover, don't try to read those small little, this just I'm putting the poster there. And basically it's like a two components we're trying to address here is, what are the systems, farming systems? Within that, what are those grassland production systems, both in vulnerable areas as well as intensifiable areas? So looking into those, the cross-cutting research streams, when I look into all the 15 CRPs and the grasslands, rangeland, livestock productions is kind of integrated in every domain. So that shows this how important in agro ecosystem the research. So looking into the how best we can make use of the geoinformatics in monitoring these rangeland ecosystems, and while looking into the real production system across the domain. So I try to touch upon little bit advances in the geoinformatics. So why you call geoinformatics? Basically, you're not just talking about the only GIS, is the remote sensing, geospatial modeling, and assessment. So we have tremendous advance in the last 5 to 10 years, especially in the last few years. We have increased spatial resolutions. Now we can able to get a sub-meter level the data on hourly basis, or not even daily basis, but hourly basis with the microsatellite, the box imaging. So then we increase spectral resolutions, now specific applications and targeted to the specific vegetation science, agriculture applications, and temporal resolutions, and of course the computational speed. What used to set it up the 250 terabyte storage just 4 years ago is $1.2 million. The same thing we can set it up $300,000 now. So that's drastic reduction in the computational power. And image processing techniques, number of virtual machines and feature extraction tools and automated algorithms and open source codes, they are available now public domain, so that you don't need to spend expensive software. And of course the cost of hardware, software, in general, the technology became more viable and cheaper than it used to be in the past. And the cost of the data, of course, just 10 years ago, someone talked about remote sensing, that no, it's expensive, they forget about it. So now that's free of cost. When the USGS NASA released the Pathfinder data set from 1972 onwards to till now, it's 30-meter data. It used to be pay $600. Now it's entire era of Landsat data is free to public domain. So that opened a new era in the remote sensing applications in natural resource management. Just looking at this, evolving the pixels to specific needs. We're not just worried about the overall assessment of the country level, but looking at the pixel dynamics at the national level, even at the country and even the farm scales. Just to give the one overview of the number of pixels per per acres or hectares. Most of the public domain, these things they're talking about, hardly less than one pixels. But now we are moving into the more data point in each the entities. So we are more detailed level of observations. So that opened the new era in the applications. Just in the trade-off, of course, where we are doing it the local scale or the global scale. So even though you say that like 60 slides, don't worry, those are most of them are just the pictures. I try to avoid as much as figures and text in the picture so that because the afternoon session, so I just try to put a more picture and picture tell 1,000 words. This is a pictorial representation of how we can data points is increased with enhancing the applications. So this is one quick example, whether you want to do it the global scale or move to the farm scale. So there is a change in paradigm. We used to look at the global picture, regional pictures. Now most when it comes to interventions, looking into the individual, the entities, we have to look at the farm scale, even the much lower scale. So that is where it comes to the different multi-scale, the remote sensing applications for upscaling and downscaling of the production system. This is just the picture, how diverse are the systems and how it is changing over a time. Just like looking into where the agriculture is abandoned in some place of the world, but it is the flourishing in other part of the world. So how best you can track these changes. Of course, so we have the number of options to use these data for the number of applications. Here I just give the one single example, taking one sensor at the ground level, the airborne and spaceborne applications. There is a number of sensors. I'll come on the slide, but here is to give. So what are the different features which required for the feed resource assessment? What is the optimum scale? We can come to the one point where you can make use of this, the spatial, the entity to define the metrics of the feed resources and its characteristics. So this again is the big poster I just trying to put in the small. Just looking into the existing onboard active sensor at less than 1 meter, 1 to 5 meter, and 5 to 30 meters, and medium and coarse resolution satellites. So these are the existing on-orbit satellites. It's available for this feed resource and grassland monitoring and livestock feedstock assessment at farms to national to regional and global scale. Of course, there are each country have the number of missions, especially like the slide is showing the NASA, the $30 billion 10-year NSA programs on that one. Then there is then Indian satellites, same thing with China and Brazil and Indonesia. The number of satellites now coming up. But there's a huge competition in the private sectors. They're investing a lot of microsatellites and UAVs applications into the remote sensing in agriculture and ecosystem research. Of course, so how best we can, what you can see in the ground here, the small picture, how best you can take to the global scale. So there is a common entities. Here what I'm trying to summarize is, there is even though satellites are differ, number of bands, channels are differ, but there is a common channels between each sensor, so that you can take what you can measure at the ground, at the small plot, to the regional scale, at global scale, using just common, the band entities in the picture. And this is one example we did in the Oklahoma, the grassland monitoring. So try to look into what happenings in the energy flux, carbon flux, and productivities at the ground, how best you can link them into the water energy cycles and methane, and to the airborne sensor, to the large scale assessment to test these, all what's happening in the global change, the issues with respect to the change in the climate. So of course this lot of the UAVs becoming more popular now, and the cost of the UAVs is coming down, so like hardly less than $1,000 to $2,000, and now we can able to the monitor the systems. And of course the hyperspectral camera, and just it used to be like not not less than 10 kilo, now it is 8 grams, the hyperspectral sensor. So that the reduction in the payload capacity and the size of the sensors, the enormous opportunities to use in the vegetation monitoring, especially like a changing vegetation flux. There is a citizen science community. Just as one example I'm giving is the Earth observation and modeling facilities, where in Oakland there is the field data collections algorithms. You can use the cell phones and give that. It's open source and public domain entities collecting over 1 million the pictures, so they can use it for the field assessment without spending too much time on the field data collections. Of course, there is a lot of the ODK. This is the one we developed recently. How best you can make use of this, the Galaxy tab, smartphones to create, collect data and share in the public domain. So having this is all implemented. What I'm giving all the examples is what we already implemented, those examples for the field resources and forage assessment at regional to global scales, mostly in the developing countries. So there is a lot of the tools available. And when you look into the global scale pictures, the tens of kilometers, tens of hectares, or 1 kilometer to 10 kilometer grids, what you can see in the Central Asia, it's very sparse vegetations. Even you may not able to account most of the classifications at global scale that tells that it is the sparse vegetation and desert system. But those are the major, the livestock feeding areas in Central Asia and the most part of the West and Northern African regions. So how big can measure the detail, the percent cover using this, the ground-based, the pictures, and trying to link those real percent of cover to the pixels 1 meter, then upscale to the global and regional assessments. So having this, connecting those dots, what you are measuring at the small scale into larger pictures, give the assessment of where are those feed resources, what in this the Bernard, so that the model, you're looking into the feed assessment, but national scale. The entire one administration unit, whether district or the state or country, having one point saying that this productivity level of this country this much. But within the country, where are those, the hotspots of the low and high productivity levels? Then you have to move to the remote sensing applications. So here we already know about the FAOs, the National Feed Assessment, the work, the headed by Dr. Harinder. And this is, I'm trying to avoid all those, the good case studies using the remote sensing applications for the National Feed Assessment. I try to look into the different component in this one. So whether we can map those resources as global production systems, look into how much is those the rain-fed farming systems and savannas, grasslands spread across the globe, and look into the individual entities, how those production systems, rain-fed, basically it's combination of both the grassland and the croplands mixture, so how that they play important role in the feed resources and feed stock for the livestock. So tapping unused potentials, this is what I'm talking about here is when you look into the fallow areas, especially just take one example, rice fallows in South Asia, it is over 15 million hectare left fallows after the rice is harvested. Can you tap these resources to grow the short duration crop, especially legumes, after the rice harvest? Can use that as, or you can use the alfalfa or like the short duration of the crops after the fallow can give it as a feed resources. And looking at all the total, the yellow, the areas, the single vegetation cycles, mostly the rangeland, croplands, but there is a lot of the fallows left before the kharif, after the kharif because of the failure of monsoons. Sometimes a lot of the moisture left after harvesting the first season crops can make use of this single and double crop fallow areas after the harvest to grow more feedstock from that resources. And of course, there is a changing dynamics. Our cropping system in the South Asia is mostly dependent on the monsoon pattern. So look into how this monsoon pattern is playing over a year. So what happens if the kharif seasons, like what they call first growing seasons, it fails, how it impact on the total food productions, whether it is suppose if you are looking into now one of the presentations mentioning that crop residues is one of the alternative for the feedstock, so that how that impact into the feed resources. Looking into the diversification, intensification of those existing production systems, so whether we can improve the feedstock assessment, and especially the crop fallow area intensifications. So most of the intensifications have to come from the 72% it meets, so then we can further increase the production. So there is always that the climate is playing the productivity. It's always dynamisms in how it is changing. Just looking into those, you may not be seeing the very global picture, the national pictures. Just looking into those detail in annual basis, how that productivity is of the changing. So how best it's impacting, because of we need a constant, the uniform supply of the feedstock if you want to the milk productions or the dairy productions in this one, but that is not the nature. It is not a constant. So how best you can cope up with this kind of variabilities in the productions. Then there is uncertainty of the productivities, whether it's the global increasing the precipitations or decreasing the precipitations, and where is the temperature, the role of temperature, increasing temperature. Maybe it's playing good role in the temperate climate. What about the tropical regions? So there's already constraint of the reducing the precipitation, increasing temperature. So how that play a role? So that is declining the vegetation. Look into all the dry areas, the grassland is already dry. It's getting more drier and increasing the carrying capacity. This is one example I'm showing in the Jordan. So because of this, a lot of incentives to buy more goats and sheep by the smallholders. So they introduce the more sheep than its carrying capacity is basically grazed out the entire agriculture, rangelands, the systems, how that the overall, the productivity is declining, how best you can cope up with such changes in the long-term run, so that you have to measure that in the large-scale domain to assess its change in the dynamics. Of course, there is not only just the total amount of the biomass or the feed resource available, and what the quality and the amount, so how much is the palatable grasses. There is a lot of invasive species taking over the grassland system, which is unpalatable for the most of the small ruminants. So how best you can cope up with such changes. So whether you're able to see how this dynamics of the species compositions over a long term, so you can able to track down. So variabilities, that's what we discussed. The change in declining the variabilities in one place is also like the identifying the uniform pattern, the grazing, so where we are frequently going to the same area because of the lack of the informations. And sometimes the herders, they have their own pattern of going without looking into the other resource available in the same. So that put the more pressure, like in Central Asia, they used to be go to the highlands when the changes in the weather pattern, but because of there's not much of the herds are changing the pattern of the herds, so they are kind of segregating in the same locations rather than changing their frequent locations. So this kind of the inventories across the large scale and their annual dynamics, how best you can measure annual dynamics, it is changing pattern, how best you can measure that pattern and the spatial extent, rather than just looking into the one country as a one entities, that may not solve the problem. Of course, there's a policy level, how much is the feed required, so supply demand is necessary. But if you look within the country, within the state, within the district, or within the province, where are those concentrated area for the feed resource? Where is more change happening? So how best you can cope up with those changes? And look into this, the interesting trajectory of the land use change in the Soviet era. I'm just giving one simple examples of how this lot of the croplands used to be in the Soviet era. They cleared the last of the pristine landscape, then that changed to the what now we can see. There's someone is asking that where are those more grasslands, because of there's a lot of pressure, so whether it's still increasing. Look into this, the picture here. It says there is 45 million hectares of the Eurasian steppe grassland were converted into croplands in the Soviet era, and most of them are abandoned now. Just looking into the simple one small examples from the Kazakhstan, 39.4% of the total area, they used to be the good croplands. Because of the shortage of the water resources, land degradation, salinity, they abandoned. So that automatically they turn into the grassland, so that you are increasing grassland in one part and decreasing other part. So that this kind of the resources can still play a great role identifying those trajectories, how this land is land curve changing, how best you can make use of the resource assessment. So again, just like just taking one example of the water productivities, how efficient is this, the draining the, pumping very deep aquifers, Jurassic aquifer to cultivate the croplands and the livestock feedstock here in Saudi Arabia. So you heard about this, the Saudi king is the milking the desert. There's in one of the CNN I was reading that one. So okay, that's true. When we went there in Saudi Arabia, and the centripetal systems here rotating 24 hours a day and 7 days a week continuously throughout the year. So even that it's not finished the half of the circle already, the area in the backside is dried out. So much of evapotranspirations, and still they are pumping it because of the highly subsidized the oil. They are 0.1 cents per liter or something to subsidize to these systems. Of course, they look into the picture. They stopped the growing the wheat next year onwards, but still they're continuing the dairy production system. Look into the largest, the Almarai and those big, the production, milk production, the system, they got 2.5 million liters of the milk a day. That is in the dry areas. There is from nothing, nowhere. So there's go a lot of the corn and alfalfa grow. Then we are looking at those, within those pictures, what is the best way to reduce this, the water use efficiency, the increased water use efficiency, reduce the water loss. They are just trying to understand this different experiment there. What is the water productivity of those, the feedstock at very high resolutions, the images, then you can try to monitor them, how best you can reduce the variable rate irrigation system so that they can grow more with less water. So, but that comes to the very small cell pictures, but often as a policymaker, as the national feed system, as the milk industries, they're looking into the very large pictures, what is the changing pattern. Of course, it's the condensed, what's called the concentrated, the farming or managed farming systems, that's one picture, otherwise the free grazing system. So try to understand how best we can see where the potential area for the livestock feed and inventory and the remote sensing based. So this is one example, look into that, the model versus the measured, the productivities using this time series, Moody's satellite images and the flux data at the 1 point level. It will give the good estimation of the productivities. So then how best you can use these simulations at the large scale to see where are the productivities there. So just giving some examples in a different the model tested across the lot of the ecosystems, whether from the rain-fed, irrigated, and temperate, and now trying to look into the FAO's different production systems like farming systems, which farming systems do what, their productivity levels under different the climatic conditions and weather pattern. So using this kind of the informations at daily basis, now satellites, we can, at least free satellites, we can available on the daily basis. How best you can make use of these informations available to the resource managers. So we have very large scale, the systematic. I'm not talking about all those, there is the thousands of satellites in the orbit, but they are not systematic. So they are not acquiring, irrespective of the data demand, they're not acquiring what is called wall-to-wall coverage. Like a lot of the commercial satellites, they only acquire if there is order is there, if the request is there. But these are the satellite that I'm talking about, the free satellite data sets, and they are wall-to-wall coverage. So that's not left any part of the world in the given time except some north and south poles, but at least most of the production systems. Here looking at the Moody's, we are very systematic from the 2000, and it's continuing with VNS data for a few, continuously it is available in systemic data. And then using the same thing, like what we are looking at the 500 meter, 50 meters, then you can look into the very more detailed level, like a 30 meter spatial resolutions. But now with the launch of the Landsat 8, it's so that we have data available from the 70s, 75 onwards. It's further continuing this mission. So how best you can make use of these resources to the feedstock assessment at the global scale. So this data is there, there's algorithms is there, just need the capacity development to make use of this data to produce this meaningful the resource assessment for the number of regions. Of course, there's one of my most exciting from the East European Space Agency, the Sentinel and Sentinel-2. There is a number of series of satellites, Sentinel-1, 2, 3. Sentinel-1 is already, there's a more SAR, synthetic apparatus, but Sentinel-2 is optical. More what you can see in the daily basis and the MODIS, but high spatial resolution like Landsat. It is a combination of what you can see in the MODIS in daily, then high spatial resolution, they put it together. Now we have more number of bands and very high spatial resolutions and very wide swath. Just look into that, the red, yellow, and the pink, the swath. Swath means is the amount of the data covered by satellite in one path. So how much area it covers in one go. Just look at that. That's such as the even coarse resolutions, but in like the 10 meters, your swath, it's double the existing system. So you are covering the more data and given point, and revisits daily. You can see how many days data revisit frequency. So basically at least 6 to 7 times on average you will get in the given locations. That you can model your productivities, the evapotranspirations, energy exchange at very detailed on daily basis. How best you can feed this into the existing model, you can come out with most the assessment when you can do the integrated the farming system in the past. So we have a number of things go to the farmers or the industries, oh, this is the best, you can use it. But what is the best way you can provide them the package, the practices and the priority areas where they can use this kind of information. Of course, they need the good cyber infrastructure. It's mostly accessible everywhere. Now the cloud source is becoming most cheaper now, widely available. I set it up, this one is the 6 months ago, the 350 terabytes to run this kind of the analysis in a very wide domain. So you can see the more Laikadas, there is some the main side, but the dryland systems on all the dry areas of the world. And this one is this site is just the beta version, trying to put whatever the data sets we have access to the public domain so that people can access to those kind of information, they use it for further. So with that, I give just overview of how remote sensing can be feed resource assessment. And there's just, thank you.